Buenos dias from Laos Point. This is the Rorschach Argentina update from the 11th of June, 2026. A quick summary of what's going down in Argentina. We can't start the episode with a topic that's not the massive outpouring of collective grief on the outskirts of Buenos Aires. Carlos Alberto Solari, the iconic rock musician known as Indio Solari, passed away on Friday the 5th at 77 after suffering a stroke. He had been living with Parkinson's disease for a decade, which eventually forced him to leave the stage. The legendary singer was the enigmatic voice of working-class resistance and counterculture during and after the last military dictatorship. Tens of thousands of devoted fans formed queues stretching more than 6 kilometers under drizzling rain to pay their respects at a sports stadium at Villa Dominico inside the Buenos Aires province. The massive farewell turned into a final ritual for his fandom, who spent hours singing and dancing in the streets, transforming the viewing into a celebratory mass. Martin Menem, the House Speaker, rejected holding the wake at Congress due to security concerns. This decision drew sharp criticism from fans who viewed the move as a political snub against the singer, who was a declared Peronist and an open critic of President Milei. Since we mentioned the passing of this icon, a compelling piece by Marcelo Fernández Bitar dives into how his music came to define the social fabric of the country. Writing for the Buenos Aires Herald, he explores how Indio Solari and his legendary band Patricio Rey y sus Redonditos de Ricota built a cultural force that combined elements of a secret society, football fandom, and religious community. Link in the show notes. Leaving the musical tributes behind, a political showdown is unfolding in Congress. The Senate approved 74 judicial nominations in an intense session, directly defying President Milei's explicit attempt to withdraw candidate Maria Veronica Micheli. This executive branch tried to drop Micheli's specific name from the larger package of court appointments because she is the sister-in-law of Hugo Elconada Mon, an investigative journalist who is actively looking into a cryptocurrency controversy involving government officials. By approving the entire block of 74 judges anyway, the Senate sent a forceful message of independence directly to the executive. Shifting focus from political showdowns to positive financial balances, the government secured a major milestone ahead of schedule. The central bank met its full-year dollar-buying target with the International Monetary Fund in just 6 months, purchasing over $10 billion so far this year. Luis Caputo, the economy minister, celebrated the achievement, noting that booming energy and mining exports now match farming revenues, which positions the administration to achieve its reserve goals for the first time. In an update to a story we covered in previous week regarding the frozen university funding law, the ongoing battle over higher education spending has reached the Supreme Court. The government appealed a provincial court order that required them to execute the funding updates passed by Congress. Legal experts warned that Milei's decision to sign the law while simultaneously suspending its budget allocations via decree sets a dangerous precedent that overrides legislative authority. While the universities fight for their budgets, a coalition of prominent journalism and human rights organizations, including Amnesty International and the Center for Legal and Social Studies, issued a warning against a new government proposal. The administration recently introduced a lobbying transparency bill designed to track private interactions with public officials. However, the groups argue that the text features an extraordinarily broad definition of interest representation because it treats standard civic advocacy the same way as commercial corporate lobbying. Critics warn it could subject routine community participation and independent journalism to permanent state surveillance, backed by criminal penalties of up to 2 years in prison. Turning our attention to the volatile foreign exchange market, the local currency is facing its worst stability problem in months. The Argentine peso dropped about 6% over the last 8 weeks, marking the largest decline among emerging markets during this period. Investors are growing risk-averse as policymakers allow one-day repo rates, which are the short-term interest rates banks receive when lending funds back to the central bank, to remain below inflation. The slide reverses the real gains the peso built up during the start of the year. If you are trying to make sense of these complex monetary indicators, you're not the only one. Private consultancies are split on whether the country's economic recovery is stalling. While official figures for March showed a sharp jump in activity, preliminary data for April shows manufacturing fell 2% and construction dropped 4% compared to the previous month. Firms like EcoGo and Equilibra report a contraction driven by weaker consumption and a delayed harvest, while think tanks track modest gains. In other economic news, local consumers are showing visible signs of strain. A study by the consultancy firm Analytica shows that over 5 million people are in severe debt delinquency, meaning their payments are more than 90 days late. The issue heavily impacts young adults between 18 and 30 years old, where the delinquency rate reaches nearly 40%. This financial stress directly correlates with the sharp rise in youth unemployment during the past year. Speaking of localized economic struggles, one provincial government is turning to an old alternative to fund wages. Ricardo Quintela, the governor of La Rioja, announced that the province will issue its debt cancellation bonds, locally nicknamed chachos, starting this August. For those unfamiliar with local history, these are quasi-currencies, essentially provincial emergency bonds printed by local governments to act as cash when cash runs out. La Rioja remains locked out of international debt markets due to a 2-year default and is suffering from a drop in federal revenue transfers, forcing officials to use domestic bonds to pay for public sector wage hikes. Moving from provincial debts to maritime security, a separate economic push is taking place on the diplomatic front. Argentina officially applied to join the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, a dynamic free trade area representing 12 major economies. If completed, the entry would place Argentina in a shared trade agreement with the United Kingdom for the first time since the 1982 South Atlantic War. The move is part of President Milei's policy to open up international commerce, though domestic opposition leaders have raised concerns over how the trade framework might affect sovereignty claims over the archipelago. Behind these formal trade expansions lies a growing concern over the protection of natural resources. A worrying report has focused attention on the South Atlantic Maritime Shelf. The Latin American Foundation for Fisheries Sustainability warned that foreign fleets operating just outside Argentina's exclusive waters are catching up to 4 times the volume of the entire national fishing industry. Hundreds of vessels, mostly from China, are targeting squid and hake, threatening the biological collapse of the marine food chain. On a lighter note, a football fan's online joke has triggered a highly anticipated international meeting. Tim Payne, a defender on New Zealand's national football team, met face-to-face with Argentine social media influencer Valen Escarcini, known better as El Scarso. Only a couple of weeks ago, Escarcini playfully asked his millions of viewers to follow the unheralded player, calling him the least known defender at the World Cup. The campaign caused Payne's Instagram following to explode from 4,000 to nearly 5 million in a single week, officially outnumbering the following of New Zealand's famous all-black rugby team. Now, to close this edition, football fans from across the country are officially counting down the hours to the start of the 2026 FIFA World Cup. Argentina will make its tournament debut against Algeria on Tuesday, the 16th of June at 10 p.m. local Argentine time. You can tune into the live broadcast on TV Pública or TIC Sports, which will be televising the game nationwide, or head to local fan zones in public plazas if you're in Buenos Aires City. And that's it for this week. Thank you for joining us. Anything to ask or tell us? info@rorschach.com. Nos vemos la próxima semana.